So it looks like our audio is on. We're in the boardroom at the state office building on 5th South. My name's Brian Olmstead, here with Amanda Charlesworth, Marilee Wendell, and Rita Brock. We think of ourselves as the EARS team, and we may not want to know what you think of us. So we'll save that for Q&A later. No, we're nice people. But we're going to talk today. We've put together this quick presentation. We're going to go through, it's maybe about 18 slides. And the main part of today is going to be Q&A. So we'll get to your questions, specific LEA questions. We're going to give you specific answers. We will be sharing all of this material later. We're going to develop a Q&A document kind of on the fly. You'll see that later as we get into that. A lot of changes in EARS. We did a webinar, I want to say it was the end of August. Yeah, and hopefully you've had a chance to view that and think about what you'd like to do. And I'm just going to jump in here. It's not working.
I guess not.
Okay, so we're going to, okay. I'll just have to say next slide.
Yes.
That'll work. We can do that. This just making sure that you understand how to participate today. Using the chat box is a great way to send your questions. Also, audio, you'd have to use your computer's audio, and make sure if you choose that option to keep yourself muted during the presentation, except when you want to talk. Otherwise, we get lots of cross chatter and interference. So I think we'll go next. So the big thing that we are dealing with as applications are coming in, it's this idea that the board added to the rule. So our rule is 277708. They added the option for the LEA to include their own definition of at risk of academic failure. They also added that in your use of funds, so in your activities, you could address truancy. Let's go next slide. So why create a definition? It's really for your benefit if you see it that way. And I would say you need to see it that way before you exercise it, because if you choose to exercise that option, it requires a little more work on your part. It's a benefit to your LEA if you want to expand the group of students that you'd like to serve with these funds. And I think it's something we can't forget, that this is a targeted allocation of funds, right? The legislature has created this. It's targeted to a specific population according to the statute and the board rule. It's students who have scored low proficient on these assessments. So if you don't like that definition, if you don't like the idea of serving that population and then tracking the funds for activities that serve those students who have scored below proficient, then you have the ability to exercise that option. So that's why I would say it's a benefit to LEAs, but it's one that you want to choose carefully. Because if you go down that road, now let's go next slide. I think we're, so yeah, and I talked about that. Let's go to the next one. So if you choose to create an LEA definition of what your students at risk of academic failure is defined as, and then you maybe have ABC, 1, 2, 3, right? Measurable, identifiable statements that create a subset of your all-student population. Then this is the form that you fill out in the UCA. You would indicate that, has your board chosen to define their own, you'd mark yes, and then if yes, has it been approved by your board, right? Is that that's the second yes?
Yes.
And sometimes that's no. Sometimes you're working on a local board approved definition, and so it hasn't been formally approved. We're okay moving forward in that space. So you could say yes, and then the second question might be a no. But that big box right there, what is your board definition? That's where you would describe how you are identifying. So one of the problems we're seeing is people are kind of blending activities with the definition. Activities is a whole different, it's like phase 2, right? It's like step 2. First, we want to define the population you're working with, because that definition will help us in the monitoring of how those funds are being used. These funds have to be used, again, for a targeted population. So you can't be all students. You can't be, we'll talk about this a little later. You can't be special ed students, because special ed students already are defined as a subset. They have funding. And talking to the special ed department here, that could get us into some Office of Civil Rights issues if you were to say that like all special ed students are at risk of academic failure. That's a bad road to go down. Let's go to the next slide. So we want to show some examples. So the first set's going to be those that are using option 1. So this is if you stay with the State Board of Education's definition of at risk of academic failure. In the UCA, you're asked to describe those activities. And let's go to the next slide. So this is, we've modified some of these examples, others are not so modified, and there's some exact language, but this is language that works. This would be approved, because this is saying that the funds are going to be used for a portion of a salary, and the portion is the percentage of the total population of then identifies at risk. So you might have a 43.8% at-risk population for your district or LEA as defined using the below proficient on a statewide assessment. So then you could fund 43.8% of a salary that is serving all students, but so the 43.8% goes towards that targeted population. That works. This example is a student service coordinator, a school guidance counselor, and their work, of course, is over all students, but the funds would be targeted to help that population. This works, it's approved. This is more in line with what EARS has kind of done in the past for many years. Let's go to the next slide. So this is one that's, and I apologize for lots of text, it probably gets small for people, but we're trying to highlight some of these points. this would not be approved because it's less definable and it's more all population. So this is talking about like students at risk with regard to psychological analysis, strategy development, implementation, parental involvement. You can't measure that, right? So how does that help define a population? It really doesn't. Resulting in classroom management strategies. Well, classroom management strategies, you know, that happens in everything that we do in education. This down on the third point here, the ELL students, this is a tricky one, that if you're using the board definition of member at risk of academic failure means those students have scored below proficient on a statewide assessment, well, you can't just say that that's ELL students, because that's not a one-to-one correlation. Just because you're an English language learner or English learner, or the new term is multilingual learner.
Multilingual learner, MLL.
MLL, we're hearing. So, but just because you are that type of student doesn't mean you've scored below proficient on a statewide assessment. It's the one is in place before the other. So you can't serve all ELL students by definition if you're choosing that state board definition. I hope that's making sense, that the state board definition does not, if you can't see me, but I'm grabbing my arms. I'm encircling my arms around, so you have all students. Well, a subset of that is the below proficient students. So your arms come in a little closer. Well, there might be ELL students outside of that. They might be proficient on some statewide assessments. For instance, math is always, that's the one I call out, that you might be proficient in math and you're not in language, and so you are not in the subset of population to be served by EARS funds. Anyway, so ELL students, if you've chosen option one, you can't say ELL students live within that subset. Let's go to the next slide. I'm supposed to be getting to your questions. Okay, so here's a couple examples of, so if you choose the option to create your own local definition, let's go to the next slide. So this is one, there's some language here, they've talked, kind of described in a narrative form a population, and then they come down to some very measurable things. So this would be saying, I've got students who have poor attendance, and that's measured by more than 10 consecutive days. That's measurable. That also would drop you from your SIS system, but that's another issue. But so it's a number of days equals poor attendance. Okay, I can measure that. That's going to create a certain population of students. They're reading below grade level. We know how to measure that. We know that creates a set of students. They have low assessment scores measured, so that's combining all of that. And then we have this grades, students in danger of failure, right? So a D or below. The problem there is being in danger of failure doesn't mean that you've actually, it's not measurable, it's a future thing that may or may not happen. So it's really hard to define the population set here. So let's go, so here's the amended version. So exactly the same, except those students who scored a D or below. So after the fact, say you do grading at the quarter, and so every student that scored a D or below would now be in the population that can be served through EARS funding. And so that little tweak in the language helps define a specific group of students that then we can now fund activities. So we can go back and say, okay, I've got X number of dollars. These are the students I'm helping, and we draw lines between our interventions and activities. Let's go to the next. So here's another. So this example, A, B, and C, talking about specific things that can be measured. It creates, below proficient, off track for graduation, right? Trending off track, calculated the number of credits. Okay, so these things are very measurable. And then we get to this fourth item where we have, as a student with a disability, that's just not allowable. And again, I was told, talking to the special ed department here, you don't want to go down that road. You don't want to equate all students with a disability as being at risk of academic failure. And she told me that would be a very bad OCR type thing that we just don't want to go down. And the idea, of course, would be, I know that students with disabilities often have, I want to say adjustments, that's the wrong word, modifications, accommodations, things like that. And so they are shown as proficient. They also, there's alternative assessments as well. It's just not a clear line that every student with a disability is at risk of academic failure. And so if we can go to the next slide, I can't remember if we showed we didn't. Okay, so the idea there would be to delete that language and not do that. Now I want to point out something here that you'll see that in this local definition, they have also identified the English language learner population. Well, that works in your local definition. Remember, that didn't work if you use the state board's definition, because the state board's definition, again, is only scoring below proficient. What this example does is this example identifies that population as one of this LEA's populations to be served. So it's beyond being below proficient. In fact, see, their A is below proficient, and then they've basically added B, C, and D. So that's, again, that's back to that, the option to choose to create your own definition. But in doing that, you need to be careful that it is a specifically defined population. All right, let's go to the next couple slides we're going to talk about in the Utah grant system. So this is just our suggestion. In the UCA, the Consolidated Application System, which is going away after this year, you're still responsible to apply in there. And that's where your application is approved. In the Utah Grant Management System, that's where you'll be doing the financial portion. There is this section called Project Abstract. It allows you, it's just free text. I can't, it's like, it has a capacity of like pages. I can't remember. So you can put material in there, but our instructions to the LEAs at this time is you really don't need to do anything in there, because the application that's being approved is the UCA. So if you want to put anything in this project description, our suggestion is to just say, please see the UCA, because that's where your application is. That's where it's being approved. We're seeing some LEAs put a lot of material in this section, which again, we can't block it out. It's not something that can be like closed or locked. Our problem is when people put stuff in there, we've taken a look in there, and sometimes it's different than what's in the UCA. And so we're at a kind of a quandary, and so, okay, what are they doing? And what we've decided is the plans are in the UCA, those are the approved plans. If something else is entered in the project abstract, in the grant management system, we are not looking at it because we are not using that system for the application this year. So again, our instructions to you as an LEA are just write, please see UCA or leave it blank. Those would be the two things. The other thing in the Utah grant management system, this is where you would put your budget, and it's just by these categories. This is a sample budget in the system. Basically, you know, those big categories, salaries, benefits, purchase services, tends to be where most of the year's funds, a little bit of travel and some supplies, again, according, you know, to your plan. Indirect cost rates are figured automatically. You cannot adjust them. As you enter the direct expenses, the indirect cost rate is already entered for each LEA, and it will figure it. And I can't remember, are we restricted or unrestricted?
Restricted.
We're restricted. Okay, so it's your restricted rate that is in there, and again, nothing can be done. It just calculates automatically. And those two things are in the grant management system. Everything else is in the UCA. Next slide, I think we have,
We're done.
we didn't, okay, so we are at Q&A. I thought we had a snapshot of the UCA page, but it's very familiar to everyone.
I put instructions on the slide.
Oh, did we?
That I said, I put under the notes, I put instructions on how to upload the dot and where to find it.
In the UCA.
Yeah, I put instructions under the note I sent it to.
Okay, so we've got our contact information. I think a lot of people, the UCA has been around a long time. Hopefully our working within that is comfortable for everybody. We're ready to help you, but let's go. Okay, so we're gonna take like 30 seconds here to, I think Amanda's gonna give my screen the hosting. And I'm going to bring up what is basically a Google Doc. And we're going to take your questions now, and we're going to basically do a live build of a Q&A. So give us just a minute to get ourselves set up here. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Try and get all that out of the way, and I think we're ready. We've got.
So go ahead.
Do we have questions coming in? Is anybody on audio that wants to verbally?
Can you read?
So what was due, okay, so the question is, this was due on November 1st. Can we now go back and edit based on today's training, and how long will it be open for editing? So the UCA, and maybe Rita, I'll have you talk about the UCA. So will you talk about that? November 1st was the application deadline in the UCA, but that is always negotiable.
Yes.
You want?
Well,
How do they edit?
They would have to go. We would have to reject. They've already submitted it to us. We would have to reject it. Once we reject it, they can start from draft started, and then has to be approved through the various business administrator, program administrator, and then at the end is the superintendent administrator or charter school administrator. I suggest anytime you want to make a change like that, please call us, because every time we reject a UCA, then you guys, the LEA, have to start the process all over again. And since we want you to receive this funding as soon as possible, please don't hesitate to call us and we will tell you what to do. If you look at slide number 7, I've had some LEAs that have they didn't know how to upload the document called Enhancement for a Risk Governing Board's Approved Definition of a Risk of Academic Failure. So I put instructions there into the notes, especially for those LEAs that are new to the UCA, and that way they know how to upload and how to send us this template.
You'll be able to see that after when we send you this PowerPoint. It will have the notes attached to it. You can't see them on the screen right now.
Oh, that's right.
So I think the main answer to the question is we can edit. If you've already been approved, we would have to reject, or if it's already been submitted,
Right.
To us.
we would have to reject it. So that's where a specific email to Rita or Mara Lee is going to be necessary if you've already submitted your UCA and you want to edit it. And because what it does, they hit reject, and then basically it's back in your hands to resubmit.
It can also happen in the way of if you've been approved, because it can go back into draft status and you can make the changes and it will be again submitted to us for
A second.
a second review.
Another thing that I may add, if those LEA have difficulties uploading the documents into the UCA, please don't hesitate to send them to us directly via email. If that is easier for you, we're very flexible. We understand that with the new board rule changing and the new Utah grant management system, there has been a lot of holdback, and like we said, we want you to receive the funding as soon as possible. So upload documents and just, if you cannot upload document into the UCA, just send them directly to either Mary or I.
So we have a question submitted about if our LEA definition doesn't work right. What's the doesn't qualify. So perhaps you've submitted an LEA definition that is not measurable, right? That doesn't create a unique population. So if you've submitted something like that, we have Rita and Mary Lee are reading those, or working on it, and they will be replying to you individually and we're trying to basically highlight what makes your definition not qualify. You know, that it can't, because again, you know, like we talked about today, it can't be all students, can't be, you know, unmeasurable, things like that. And so they'll highlight that in a personal response back to you.
But right now we have about 154 of them out there, so we're getting through them as quickly as we can. But if you know you want to change it, just email us, and again, we can
Walk you through.
just reject it, and you can make what changes you want to do without even waiting for us to review it once.
And if you decide, for instance, if you have chosen option 1 and decided to go with option 2, that's no problem. Just again, resubmit the governing board approved definition of a risk of academic failure, and we will work with you.
Okay, so just a clarifying question. Are we required to have an LEA board definition for ears? And no. So you're not required to exercise the option to have a local definition. It's your option, but you're not required to. If you choose to go with the USBE definition, then that identifies, again, the targeted population for EARS funding is, or are, not sure what the right grammar there is, it's all students who have scored below proficient on a statewide assessment. That's the That's the critical piece to understand. If you choose to not create a local definition, then that is the state's definition. And then that then what dictates where the dollars can be spent.
When you receive the PowerPoint, it will be on slide 6, and there's also some notes, and I think it will make it clearer. I hope.
So if someone's asking then if your definition is rejected, can we proceed without the definition? You could, if your local definition is rejected and you just want to proceed using the state definition, maybe for the 18-19 school year to get things rolling and maybe spend some time thinking about how you might want to locally define the population, that would be fine. You need to let us know if you have to make a decision, right? So we need to know whether you're going with the local definition or the state definition. If your local definition is rejected, if it's not approved because it's too, let's say, wide open, and you want to say, okay, we're going to go back to option 1. We're going to use the statewide definition, the USBE definition for the 18-19 school year. We can do that. If you want to stay with the local definition and it gets rejected, we'll be working with you through that process. We won't start flowing dollars until we know where those dollars are going to be spent. Okay, the PowerPoint, yeah, we will make the PowerPoint available to all,
We're multitasking.
I'm getting my screen moved for me, sorry. We're just not projecting.
That one I disconnected from.
Okay.
So, as long as you can.
The PowerPoint, where is the PowerPoint going to be? Are we going to post it on?
After we record it.
We have to make it ADA compliant, and then it can be on our website. Until then, we can email it to the EARS contact list.
Yeah, so Jerry Record will clean up our recording. We'll merge them together and send them out to the invite list.
Okay, so we'll have the recording of this
Yes.
awesome webinar,
Yes.
and the PowerPoint will go
Yes.
together. Okay.
Good question.
New question. Would it be possible to have both definitions, those who failed an assessment, those who opted out of state but are failing course? Yes. So that's where the board has created this flexibility, is you could expand locally on the definition. So you could, like we offered an example, it was an A, B, C, D version. A was all students who scored below proficient students, right? So that, and then they added, I believe it was like credits and coursework and different things. And so yes, essentially the answer to that is yes, you could have both by combining the state definition with other elements that create your local definition. So yes, having below proficient on those assessments could be one element of your definition, and then for those students who have opted out of the statewide assessments, you have other indicators of at-risk. It just, remember, it's got to be measurable.
But in those cases, if it showed on your form you upload into the UCA, you would say, yes, you did your own definition. It just now includes that also.
Yeah, as part of it, yeah.
Any more questions?
Got a thank you out of that one. Thank you.
That's it.
So again, our contacts are available on our website. if you go to the ARC page, the Adult Risk and Custody Programs, and the EARS tab, which sounds kind of funny, doesn't it? But actually it's not there. The contact us is from the Adult Risk and Custody homepage.
Yes.
Yeah, from the little hamburger menu. That's where you get our contact us. That's what it's called. Amanda's laughing. That's right. Or is it a waffle? No,
I don't know what it is.
Waffle menus are when they put the 9 squares.
Okay.
And the hamburger are the 3 lines.
Okay, now I know.
It's a hamburger menu, yeah.
One of the things we have noticed a lot as we're approving is we just want to make sure when you do your definition, we really do want the measurable items and how you're identifying the students. And when you're doing the description in the UCA, we want you to tell us more how you're going to serve those students.
Yeah. Looking for questions. Are people kind of dropping off? Or are participants?
We still have quite a few. I could unmute.
I guess we'll, yeah, and we can do audio if someone wants to, I don't know if they raise their hand or.
Either way.
We're just looking to help you. It's you know, it's that time period of applications are in, and we're seeing a lot of common mistakes, I'll call them, and so we felt like we could address this with a webinar. So when is the new deadline of editing your submission? So that's a great question, especially on the Utah grants side of the house. So the Utah grants deadline right now is November 9th. I'll tell you that that's not going to work. We're asking for that to be extended. In fact, our ask is January 31st, 2019, because this often, the UCA application approval process is often days, weeks, even months long. And so we don't want an arbitrary cutoff. But really, once you've submitted your original application, the deadline has been met as far as application. If there's something that needs to be edited and we're asking you to resubmit, you're not late. There is no new deadline. The grant management system for entering your budget does have a deadline. Again, that's November 9th, that's Friday. We are working to have that extended because we're not close at all to having LEAs ready to enter budgets into the grant management system. So that deadline, once it does get extended, it does become a very hard line. But that is for submission of your budget. And since this is these funds are distributed through the monthly allotment schedule. It doesn't require reimbursements. It requires no other action in the grant management system.
But we do have to get it approved into both the UCA and the Utah grants to get the money flowing to you.
Right, right. Do you have a question? Okay, so the question is, do you recommend that we ask you to reject the UCA application or wait until we review it? With the number of applications, I would say if you know you want to resubmit, if you want to go back and edit your definition because you know once it gets read, it won't be approved, send an email, separate email just asking for that rejection to happen sooner than later, so that then we won't review it. We'll drop that off the list until you resubmit. And so please if you know that's going to happen, send an email, either one or both.
Either.
What do you like? Do you like to always be CC'd?
It's usually both, if we can.
Okay, so Rita and Marilee.
I do want to clarify, we're not going to be rejecting you in the Utah grant system. We will kind of just leave those sitting out there in the district superintendent approved status until we get the UCA approved. So you won't have to go take it through the whole process again. It will just be the UCA that you have to update everything in.
Right. Oh,
You're good.
gotta scroll my. Okay, do we have a?
No.
Okay.
The minutes of the building.
Part of the process is having if you choose to have a local definition, it needs to be approved by your board. Our board rule says that in your application, you'll submit evidence of that, which would be normally the minutes of that meeting. We're being a little lenient on that this year. This is all new. And with the definitions kind of being in flux, we would ask that you add that to the UCA as soon as possible. We would love to see that if it's available. We are going to approve applications without that evidence. And that's just, I think that's, for me, if I get in trouble, I'll get in trouble. That's common sense that with as much change that's happened around the EARS funding in this process, I'm going to say that's something we'll be more, more in control of next year, that we should have board-approved definitions, and we should be able to see the evidence of that. But I'm not going to have a plan not approved because of a lack of that. It does ask for that, so please submit them if you have them.
And we do need you to fill out that upload saying that what your proposed definition is. We know when you take it to your board, that proposed definition might change, but we still want to get money coming to you. So if you put your proposed definition in now, and then when your board does make the definition, if it needs to be changed, we can change it at that time.
Yeah, just don't let your boards approve something that's not measurable. Anything in the chat?
No.
Is our participant list dwindling?
I'm still there.
When you're done with us, just exit the meeting, and we'll know that when it's down to the four of us, we'll stay here for 5 more minutes after that.
Yeah, we still have a pretty good group.
Okay. And again, I wanted to say, we've made this webinar available, Q&A and everything, but remember, reach out to any of us with questions, and we're available. Email is great. Phones are we're usually around our phones. Phones aren't bad. It's funny that email is more available now than phones even, it seems like. Because the email comes on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
And you answer it on your phone.
Just another thank you. Oh, no hands raised. More thank yous.
Thank you for attending.
Thank you for your patience during this process.
Okay. Yeah, it's a big lift with EARS, and next year we're going to really start looking at EARS funding is supposed to be able to report on improvement so that we would have a baseline measurement. We would have our funded interventions, and we would be able to show that specific population that we've helped them, because we have a significant allocation for this group of students, and so we want to be able to start, and that's why the definitions need to be measurable. They need to create that targeted group that then you can get measurable data on that group. So that's going to be our next big lift. Once we've defined our populations, then we're going to, we'll get into the pre-intervention data and then the post-intervention data.
And then in 2022, the legislator will ask for this data to determine if this program
should continue or not.
The funding will be allocated to other programs. So
yeah,
it's crucial that we collect the data before 2022.
All right. Nothing else is coming through? Well, we'll call that as a sign that we've said enough. Thank you, everybody, for your participation, and keep sending your plans and your definitions in. If I would weigh in, I would say it's worth getting a local definition. It's a little bit of work. It's worth doing it right, and it's helps you serve students. One more question. If we don't submit an LEA board definition, will the UCA allow us to proceed? If you don't choose a local definition, then we would want you to upload the document saying that you're choosing the state definition. Everybody should upload that document. It's a required document in the UCA. You should mark that your LEA is not choosing a local definition, and then end of conversation. So then your population is defined as students who have scored below proficient on statewide assessments. Did that help?
Got it, perfect.
Okay. All right. All right. Again, thank you for participating. We'll make these documents available as soon as possible. We'll send them out to everybody, and just keep submitting your applications, and we're in that approval mode up here in Salt Lake. So, all right, we're going to sign off.